Hi people tuning in now. This is our live Q&A session that we run every week. This week's guest is Inka Cresswell. Oh, she's very prompt. There we go. I'm just adding her to the chat now. We'll be live in 2 seconds. Hopefully the internet will hold up. It's just connecting. Hiya, can you hear me all right?
Hi. I can hear you fine.
Perfect, yay. The internet's a bit temperamental here, so but it's good that it's working today. How are
No
you?
worries. Good. Can you hear me okay? Sounds all right?
Yeah, it's all working. So
Fantastic.
yay for internet successes today.
Well, lovely to virtually meet you. Oh,
Sorry,
no worries.
MacGyvering a little perch for my phone and it's not going so well today. Okay, there we go. So do you want to start off by just explaining who you are to any followers of ours tuning in who might not know who you are or what you do? Do you want to just explain a bit of background on you?
Yeah, of course. Lovely to meet you all. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Inka Cresswell. I'm a wildlife filmmaker and I specialize in underwater documentaries. And I also work a lot as an underwater photographer. So I basically try and share my love of the natural world through photography and film and love doing what I do.
Awesome. Oh, sorry. Terrible. It's because my phone's on charge at the same time as doing the live. Okay, right. Hopefully it'll stay. Um, okay, for people that don't know who we are and what we do, so Love the Oceans is a marine conservation organisation. Our mission is to establish a marine protected area here in Jangambe Bay in Mozambique. So we do that through lots of different areas of research and community outreach. We use a holistic approach. So we do fisheries research, humpback whales, coral reefs, ocean trash, and marine megafauna. And then we do 2 community outreach projects as well, teaching swimming and basic marine resource management. That's what we would normally be doing, but because of COVID, everything's completely changed.
Everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. So we've decided to start this online series, introducing cool new guests like you to our followers, and yeah, just having conversations with lots of industry professionals around conservation and what that looks like in the way that they work. So, if you're cool with it, should we just jump straight into the questions?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. We got sent through loads, and anyone tuning in now, feel free to submit questions in the comments box down at the bottom there, and we'll try and get through them as well. And we'll keep an eye on that through the chat. Okay, so first question is just a bit of background on you. How did you get into videography and photography and what you do now?
So I was very lucky in the sense that I'm from a scuba diving family. So my dad
Oh,
has
wow.
always scuba dived. So he got me into it really young. And I think he was kind of desperate for a dive buddy. So as soon as I was old enough, he got me trained up and he actually gave me a camera to teach me underwater photography. Not to teach me underwater photography, to teach me buoyancy.
Oh,
And
wow.
it was just like such a fantastic way to kind of move my focus away from fiddling with my scuba equipment and actually to think more about buoyancy. And from kind of doing that initially, I just fell in love with the camera and started appreciating my dives in a whole different way. So I've been taking photos underwater since I was about 12 and I've never really stopped. And I think that that kind of love of the ocean and enjoyment of scuba diving led me to university to study marine biology. Sesame Street was before, Dan. Thanks for that. And yeah, I just was very much always in love with the ocean. And it was my camera allowed me to share those stories that I learned along the way. And I was able to kind of integrate that into my studies of marine biology as well. So it was kind of a natural progression of all the things I love coming together.
That's pretty cool. That's really awesome that you have a dad that loves scuba diving. I'm the only like ocean lover in my family, so
Yeah.
it's
I didn't, again, it really wasn't much of a choice in my family. It was very much so like, you will love the ocean. And they were right. I absolutely do.
that's really good though, having that influence from such a young age, and it must be nice, like yeah, being able to bond over that kind of stuff. I tried to
Yeah.
take my dad scuba diving when I did my dive master, which was a while ago now, but he well, I'm his daughter and he wanted to look after me. And I was like, Dad, I'm the diving professional. He was like, you go first. And I was like, no, I'm the sweeper. It's my job to go last. And his
Yeah.
buoyancy, he was one of the divers that like inflates his B.Sc to like go up and then shoots up and then deflates to go down. And you're like, stop inflating and deflating.
It's such a lovely thing though, being able to share with your friends. Like my mum's nowhere near as big on diving as my dad is, and occasionally I can get her to come out on a dive with me, and I love being able to just like bring her into my world.
Yeah.
And it's so cool just being like, look, you're going to understand why I love being down here so much. And yeah, love watching that happen.
Yeah. I think my mum's a bit too concerned with getting her hair wet to really enjoy the marine environment, but maybe one day. Okay, the next question was about, well, it's kind of still around how you like got into like what you do. It was a question about what happened, what you did after graduating.
Yeah. So I was actually really lucky after graduating in the sense that I was offered a fantastic opportunity to be a young ambassador for the Waterman Project, which is this amazing organization that does loads of shark tagging work and basically is built up of freedivers who use their vessel ability to work with scientists to tag sharks and to help with telemetry work. And it was this really fantastic organization, and I was so lucky to be a part of that, and I helped them with documenting a lot of their research efforts. So I kind of finished university and went straight into working on some fantastic expeditions that were just a brilliant stepping stone into understanding more the research side of things, but also kind of testing the water in terms of, for myself, documenting these research efforts and realizing just how much I could do with my camera to really share these experiences, because there's only so few of us that actually get to encounter some of these amazing species firsthand and that get that insight into this underwater world of marine science and marine research. So being able to share that through my photography and film was a really fantastic opportunity.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. So you just kind of dove straight into it, excuse the pun.
A little bit. Dove straight into it. And then I think, I mean, as you know, I think as someone who's just finished your undergrad and working in marine science, earning money is not an easy task. So
Yeah.
for me, there was always a lot of kind of side projects I'd had going on. And I think as I developed more as a photographer, it meant that I could actually use my camera as a source of income as well. And that was a really fantastic resource for me because it meant that I could stay in the water, carry on doing what I love. And that was also the reason I became a dive instructor. So
Yeah.
in between kind of more expedition work, I would teach diving, I'd teach photography and teach dive against debris, but then also do more kind of editorial photography work that would kind of top up my income and allow me to carry on doing the expedition work that I loved.
Yeah, I do feel like it's definitely, I think marine conservation is one of those industries where people do like more than one thing. Like I've definitely noticed that doing this Q&A series, we like do a little, this is who's joining us, and then we do their job title, and it's never just one. It's like they do these 5 things.
It gets a little bit ridiculous when people are like, but what do you do? And I'm like, a little bit of everything, but today I'm doing this.
Yeah, and those questions of what does your average day look like, and you're like,
It's never the same. Yeah, average day. I mean, there'll be days obviously where you're out on the water and it's just all the things that you dream of doing, camera in hand, working with the big species. And there's days where it's just emails.
Yeah.
Like it can never be one or the other. Unfortunately, I think there's all of the admin that goes behind it is just as important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people always forget, or at least my non-marine bio friends always think like my life is just, I don't know, taking photos of whales and like dropping hydrophones and doing cool research. And I'm like, yes, but something has to happen to, yeah, on a good day. But it's like something has to happen to that research, and someone has to supervise the people doing the research and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I feel like a lot. I think it is one of the industries where you do have the flexibility to do like, because there's so much overlap within them, right? Like we've had a few different like videographers and photographers on this kind of series, and there is like most people, if they're an underwater photographer or videographer, do some kind of conservation along with it, because it's like if you're taking videos or if you're filming or photographing that environment, it's like human instinct to want to care about it, and then you end up being a conservationist because of that.
Yeah,
and obviously you've got the marine
biology
background
how you can
too.
separate them. It's so difficult to separate them these days. I think it's you automatically, especially as a photographer, you become an ambassador for the oceans. And just by sharing those experiences, you're sharing your love and your passion for that environment. And yeah, you hope that it will inspire others to care about it as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, then someone has asked about your, it's still kind of in your path of how you got to where you are, but someone's asked about you doing your dive master and working abroad as a scuba diver. How did you do that and what did that look like?
Yeah, so that was kind of just after I finished graduating, when I was kind of between doing expedition and more photography based projects. I went out to Gili Trawangan and did my dive master training. And it
Nice.
was the most fantastic experience. And I was so picky at the start trying to figure out where I wanted to do my dive master training, because it was kind of, it was a year where you're kind of one of those in between years. I was thinking about, do I go back to grad school? Do I apply for that job? And you're kind of weighing up your options a little bit. And I realized that actually it was one of the rare opportunities where I could go and really invest some time into developing my dive skills. So I was supposed to go there for 4 weeks. And 3 months later, I was still there. And but it was a fantastic opportunity. And I think the fantastic thing about Gili Trawangan especially is that there is so much work, conservation work going on the island as well, but also that entire ecosystem and the currents there are just incredible. So to be able to really kind of own my diving skills in a place where the conditions change daily just made me
Yeah.
such a stronger diver for working in all different locations and working with a whole variety of different equipment, because you were constantly preparing yourself for the ocean and kind of really gaining that respect for just how powerful the ocean can be. So
Yeah.
that was a really brilliant place to do my dive master training, and is also a huge effort to make the island plastic free. There's no cars on the island, you just walk everywhere. There's an
Wow, that's
amazing
awesome.
organization called the Gili Eco Trust who we're able to help out with, who basically they single-handedly run almost an entire recycling plant in the middle of the island and try their hardest to make all the hotels and the restaurants sustainable. And then as well as that, there's like bio rocks and people doing coral planting. So it was a really brilliant place to kind of balance that more conservation mind that I had and the artistic side, and develop both my photography skills, but also the more
Mm.
scientific and the conservation stories that I wanted to bring across into my work.
Yeah, I think it's important to to dive in places that do have such changing conditions, because I think you can obviously learning to dive and diving in like these incredibly flat, amazing, great viz all the time, no currents, conditions is like a diver's dream, right? But
Oh, it's good,
it's
but you'll be
yeah,
screwed when you go somewhere really hot.
yeah, exactly. And like where we are, you get surface currents, like you have to do negative descents on a lot of the like deeper dives. You get surface currents, you get it's kind of cold sometimes.
Yeah,
You get like surge, you get sometimes you get bad viz, like it's a real mixed bag. And you can actually see the divers that come here that have learnt in flat conditions with like
yeah,
no, we had a rescue diver that had only ever dived in like warm water, great viz, no current, like, and she panicked on the surface because she'd only ever done like hard boat diving, and we do rubber duck diving. Um, and I think like learning in a place that has potentially not the best conditions all the time is actually
you want them
great
to
to
still
build the
love it.
skills. Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to like say this carefully. Like it's all worth it because usually the best places have like even I was in Raja Ampat in January, and it was trickier than I thought it was going to be. Like I thought that Raja was meant to be like, you know, flat, no current. And on some of the dives, there was quite a bit of current, quite a bit of surge. I mean, it was beautiful and it was totally worth it, like most places are, but it's still good to have those skills and be able to build on it. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
no, I
my,
couldn't agree more. It's so funny because it's like I would always, whenever I had a student who would say to me, "Oh, I did my open water in the UK," you would instantly go, "Oh, this is going to be a dream.
yeah,
This is going to be such an easy course. Like you've already been put through all of your paces, and now you're going to fall in love with diving even more because you're going to see beautiful visibility, but
yeah,
you're so prepared." But I think as well, the nice thing about kind of really building your hours in summer with those strong currents is that you learn to appreciate them. And I absolutely love them in photography sometimes. And it's like, I know a lot of people will go, oh, current is the worst for filming or for doing photography. But actually, once you start to understand them, you can use it to your advantage. And it's like having a dolly underwater that can give you that perfect pan across the reef, or can allow you to stay perfectly still if you're kicking against the current. And there's different ways that you can manage them. And I think it starts to all play into the fun of it.
Yeah, I think sometimes you just adapt, right? Like I remember one time I was taking macro shot of a subject and I started, the current was like pushing that way and I started like this and then my body started going and I'm like still shooting and I'm like, no, 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 no. And I'm like shooting upside down. But as long as you're like comfortable going the whole way around, you can adapt and be able to do it. Okay, cool. Sorry, got sidetracked. Actually, a few questions have been sent through, so we'll just check on them. Someone said, what's your process in choosing and developing a film topic and or applying for funding?
I think in terms of picking a subject, it's finding the one that has the best story and the one that you feel that you're in the best position to tell. And I think that can be a variety of things. So the film that I recently completed was a personal authored film. And that's because for me, being my first film, it's like my experience is what I knew better than anything. And actually, I felt that from my perspective, being able to tell that story about how our oceans have changed, I could do well. And I felt that it was something that a lot of young people would relate to. And there wasn't anyone like me telling that story in those spaces. So that was the reason I mentioned that topic in my own film. But in the same way that I'm looking at other projects, it will be, okay, is there a really fantastic character who can talk to me about plastic pollution in a way that's going to make me cry? Or is there somebody who is going to tell me about this amazing interaction with a turtle that's going to make me fall about laughing and appreciate it in a whole different way? So a lot of the time, picking that subject for a film is about the characters, and it doesn't have to be people. That can be the individual, the species itself. It could just have a fantastic character and a fantastic story behind them. But I think a lot of the time it's thinking, I mean, there's stories that I've come across in the past where I've gone, wow, that would be a fantastic film. I would love to tell that story. And then I've had to take a step back and go, I'm not the right person to tell that story. I'm not an investigative journalist. I don't have the right backing yet. And I think in those cases, it's finding something that is the right fit for you, or finding the right people to collaborate with who can help you bring that to realization, but knowing when you kind of need that extra help to bring a story to life. And then as for funding, there's so many different ways. There's definitely grants and things that you can apply for. For my student film, I actually did a GoFundMe, and I also collaborated with some brands who were able to offer me support as well. So there's lots of different ways of looking at it, but I would think about what the purpose of your film is and who that audience is that you want to connect with. So if it is a film that's going to shed light on a really big conservation issue, there will be organizations that are also trying to do that same thing, and they are possible people that you could collaborate with and join forces. But as well as that, I think if you're really passionate about telling a certain story or about the subject matter behind it, often you can get discounts in other ways as well. So for me, I was actually able to bring down the costs of filming right down just by working more collaboratively with the dive companies I would be diving with. So whether that's helping provide them with media as well and working out arrangements where we could both benefit, and that meant do things on a much lower budget because it was a more independent project. But there are bigger grants available as well. It's just a matter of finding them and writing a good application.
Yeah, thinking about the subject from different angles. That's basically part of my job as a charity. Like we think about the funding, and then we think about how we can reduce the amount of funding that we need because it's so bloody difficult to get grants and all the rest of it. So you got to think of like all the different ways that you can secure funding, and there are literally so many.
And sometimes I think it's looking at things from a really different perspective as well. So it would be, okay, well, I need this money to make this film, but could I also sell an article about the film that I'm making? What would the income be from that? Can I also sell some photos from that production? Could I do a couple of social media things with some other companies that would also come towards that funding? So sometimes it's not just the film itself, but the funding that would go towards it is from a collaboration of all different projects kind of melding into one thing.
And that is why your job title is not just one thing, it's 5 different things.
Very true.
I'm just checking through some of the questions that have been sent through. Dan said, what were both of your funniest moments underwater? Points for the most shocking. Oh, God.
Funny stories.
You
There
can go
was one
first.
moment where I was doing my dive master training, and I was out on a reef doing like mapping a dive site. Because a part of what you do in your dive master training is that you have to learn how to map a site underwater, which I loved because you get to know a reef in a way that you've never learned before, understanding every little area, where the different types of coral are, making notes of what critters might be found in each place. And it's so much fun. And I was really focused on this tiny little anemone, making all my notes about it. And my buddy was next to me screaming, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And I was just like, yeah, just a minute, I'm just doing this. And she started having a full-blown freak out. And I turned around and there was a whale shark above us. And you don't even get them in the location. We were both just like, that can't be real. But it's such an incredible thing that you can't mistaken it for anything else. But yeah, there was a whale shark just inches above our heads, just swimming by. And I have a feeling if she wasn't there, I would have had no idea.
Yeah,
Absolutely no idea.
it's kind of scary how blink of vision that you have when you're diving, especially if you've got a dark mask. You like literally just see like whatever is in that tiny field of vision. It's so difficult. Like we have whales here, so you get whale call like really loud on the dives, and sometimes when they're close-ish, they're still beyond the vis line, but they're so loud, and you're like looking around like, oh, I want 360 vision.
It's
It's,
very nice.
yeah, yeah. Um, trying to think of like funny experiences. I think mine would probably be like a sighting one as well. There was we had a we have this dive site that's got some cool corals, but it's also got some largest open spaces, and we were going along like the edge with an open space on one side, and a staff member was at the front of the group, and I was kind of further towards the back, and I looked to my left, and there was just a baby humpback whale, and I was like, and you know, when it's like just far enough away that if you go the other way and grab someone to show them, then
Oh
you
my
probably
God.
won't see them anymore. So I had that moment of like, do I go and tell everyone, or do I just enjoy it? And I was like, I'm just gonna stay. And I just left. My staff member was like obsessed with some coral on the ground, and
But
I
you can never tell
yelled.
them then. That's the
Yeah.
thing.
The same staff member unfortunately missed a manta as well on like the next dive as well. She was super into coral, so I don't know whether she minded that much, but I think she was a little bit bummed out,
Oh, I'd
especially
be
the baby humpback
devastated.
whale. Yeah, it was so crazy. Like it was just chilling there, but obviously one twitch of their tail and they're off, so you don't really get to see them for that long, which is why I just kind of enjoyed it for myself. Okay, just to get through a couple more of the ones that have been submitted beforehand. Did you do a lot of internships or volunteering while you were studying?
Absolutely. My university, I went to San Diego State University in California and studied marine biology there. And I think and I think this is the case for a lot of universities, is that volunteer positions aren't necessarily advertised, but you should absolutely go for them. And
Mm.
a lot of the time that meant going up to my professors and literally saying, I'm really interested in your work. Can I volunteer in your lab? And I volunteered in almost every one of my professors' labs. And I used to fill my hours helping them out and helping them dive for specimens and kind of working with a lot of the grad students, doing all the stuff they didn't want to do. But those lab hours, I think, are so important, and kind of building that relationship with your professors and with the graduate students is so important, because you never know what's going to come up down the line. And it's like
Yeah,
actually now when I'm working on much bigger research projects, I can go, oh yeah, I know someone who specializes in that. And I can contact one of those professors who will remember who I am and have a conversation, and they'll be able to put me in contact with other scientists specializing in that area. So I think that kind of networking, even from an undergraduate level, is so important. But
yeah.
also just the experience you gain from working on a huge variety of things. I mean, I did stuff on like planktonic species, and my favorite's megafauna. But by studying even that really tiny stuff that maybe isn't as exciting, gave me such a better understanding of looking at megafauna, because
Mm.
obviously it's all so linked in this ecosystem. So yes, volunteer, volunteer, volunteer.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And also I'd say like during, obviously right now, we get a lot of emails from people looking for jobs, which unfortunately there's a shitload of cuts that are happening all over the shop because of COVID, funding's being cut and all the rest of it. But if you've got the time, like if you're studying at uni and you've got some extra time, it's worth dropping an organisation an email, because there's probably some admin that needs to get done that they don't have the staff for right now, or a grant proposal that needs to be written, and people need those people helping out. So yeah, email, just drop people lines and see if they actually need some help with stuff.
As well, like I think there's also huge value in doing volunteer work outside of the marine space. So as well as kind of volunteering for labs and with more marine organizations, I would also do volunteer hours working at like boys and girls clubs where you might help them with their homework after school, and those kinds of roles that are so far, they're not related to what I wanted to do, taught me so many skills about education and about community outreach and understanding people from different backgrounds and how people come together. So I think those kinds of experience, although they might seem like, why would that be of any use to you? You'll be amazed by how much they can come into hand further down the line.
Yeah, and I think like we occasionally get questions around when marine conservation is renowned for not having much money in the industry, and so often people need other jobs, and they worry that if that job isn't particularly relevant, but like there's so much stuff that you can pull from those jobs. So like for us, any kind of like bartending, like that's actually a useful skill, because you develop that interaction with people that you have never met before. You often, on waitressing and things like that, you'll often have to put on a smiley face and be like, it's fine, but then go and fix the problem afterwards. And that all comes in useful when you're working in this industry. So even if it feels like you're doing something that's not particularly relevant to the career path that you want to be doing, first of all, needs must, like you've got to be able to pay rent and stuff. And second of all, there is still something that you can pull from that. And especially when you get to like interviews and stuff, you can quite easily bring that in and say like, hey, I learned this from this experience. Even though it's not like in the same industry, it's still very relevant. So yeah, that would be my piece on it. Someone's asked, in your opinion, should we be aiming towards conservation, aka sustainable use, or preservation, aka exclusion of humans from the oceans?
I personally am a huge believer on preserving people, culture, and the environment as one thing. I
Yeah.
think that trying to divide them is never going to work. It's not realistic. And I think actually the idea of preservation where we fully exclude ourselves from the ocean is a luxury. And unfortunately, it's not something that everybody around the world could do. And I know that some of the fishing communities that I've worked with around the world, they aren't fishing out of luxury. It is very much so a main food source on the islands that they're from. Otherwise, all the food is being imported. So it's very much so is the most sustainable option. It's just a matter of how you go about doing that and making sure there are sustainable practices. So I very much so believe in building towards a more sustainable future where we use our oceans, but we use them in a way that is respectful and can conserve them for generations to come. I don't think that exclusion is the solution in this.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've got a fairly strong opinion on this one, because this is one of the core values of our organisation, working with humans. We believe humans are usually the cause of the environmental issues, so they've got to be involved in the solution. And there is such a thing as fortress conservation, when you kick everyone out and you just protect the environment, but you end up with massive socioeconomic problems and probably exploitation of the environment just in another area. So by developing a sustainable strategy, then people can utilize the oceans, whether that be fishing or tourism or whatever, but doing it sustainably, and be able to survive. And the kind of aim of it, the best thing that you can hope is that humans and the oceans can, without trying to sound like a hippie, but can live in harmony.
I'm with you.
Yeah, like it's a project that we're actually developing at the moment. We're developing a project with the local fishermen here. There's a problem with an imbalance in our local ecosystems between herbivores and carnivores because spear fishermen can only swim out so far, and we have a fairly steep shelf drop off. So most of the fish that are being caught by spear fishermen are herbivorous coral reef fish, which is really affecting the reefs here. So at the moment, we're developing a project with the fishermen to introduce more kayak fishing using pole and line and being able to target carnivorous fish. And that still means, and the important thing is that it's in conjunction with the community, right? It's the local fishermen that are leading this initiative, which means they can still earn money, they can still sell those fish, they can still eat those fish, they can still feed families, especially during COVID. Like, this is such a really, really difficult time because there's zero tourism. So we're talking about people fishing, as you said, not because they really want to, but because they actually have to be able to survive. And I completely agree. Excluding humans is luxury, and it's not practical in most countries, coastal countries around the world. Certainly where we are in Mozambique, it's not practical, and I would assume in most developing nations it's just not feasible, especially coastal developing nations, for marine conservation at least. It's a great question, but I think we both agree that holistic community conservation is the way to go.
I think in that as well, the important thing is to understand that one solution will never be the blanket solution for every area. I think when you're dealing with people and the environment, and there is that interaction between them, you have to look at each location as a unique place with a unique community and a unique culture. And that means engaging the locals and the people that are reliant on our oceans in the early stages of those conservation talks. And I think that's how you do it successfully. So it's one that definitely has to go place by place, but I think it's 100% doable.
Yeah, and understanding the relationship, the culture of whatever country you're in is really important to understand, because that will explain the relationship between the oceans and the humans and what that actually is and what that can be going forward. Great question. Okay, so next question, favorite part of your job?
Being in the water. Absolutely. I think there's two things. I think one of them is it's that moment where you get to see one of those species that you've always dreamed of encountering, and you almost feel like they almost don't notice you, and you get to feel like that fly on the wall and just observe. And that to me is something that's always so special, when you can watch just one of nature's most incredible dances just play out before you and just sit back and watch. Like, I'll never get bored of doing that. But I think the other thing I love about it is when I'm working with people, and it's kind of when I see my own enthusiasm reflected in others, and you realize that you're so not alone on this, and that we all share this just excitement and passion and stories. And every time that I'm doing an interview, I'm talking to somebody and that comes across, I feel all tingly, and I'm like, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, it's like having a big family that all just love the oceans. Okay, and then to balance that question out, what's your least favorite part of your job?
The admin. It's got to be the emails. And I think it's the emails, and it's kind of when you hear like the negative press about things not getting any better, and you feel like you're working so hard at something, and it's like sometimes I'll be so invested in a project and you've got sleepless nights and you're putting everything into it, and then it's like the next day it's just like, oh, the oil spill that's destroying this coral reef, and you're just it's heart-wrenching, and it almost feels personal at times, and you have to remember that it isn't. But, it definitely, there's hard parts. you get
I think that's environmentalism generally as well. Like, it's a lot of like, unfortunately, with the world that we're living in, it's a lot of bad news a lot of the time. So it is important to also keep your head balanced and try and keep good news too.
The hardest part is staying optimistic and staying hopeful, and I really want to be. So.
Yeah, gotta work to have that. Okay, what's your number one top tip for underwater filming?
I think the top tip is make sure you feel comfortable underwater first. And I think as soon as kind of scuba diving or free diving feels second nature, everything else is just 10 times easier. But I think if you're someone who is really new to scuba diving and you've just picked up a camera and you want to go and shoot a film, you're putting so many challenges on yourself. And I think that you at first always need to just get used to being underwater, get to know your equipment, know all the safety aspects like it's the back of your hand before you start adding complications. I know I said that I started with a camera when I was really young as a way of learning my buoyancy, but I would always, at that stage in my kind of my scuba career, I would always do the first dive in a new location with no camera. And that was just for me to kind of reacclimatize with the water, get used to my gear again, get used to the environment again. And then the second dive, I would reintroduce the camera. And I think that when you're starting out, that's so important just because your safety has to always be your top priority.
Yeah, and I feel like when you are put on jobs and stuff, if you took a job, there would be a certain level of competency that's assumed. So if you weren't competent in the water, that could, yeah, again, be a safety risk, right? Because people just assume that you're able to dive if you're carrying a big rig, which,
I
to be
see so
fair,
many
is
people who can't dive with big cameras.
really. I've
Yeah.
seen. Yeah, I guess every Tom, Dick, and Harry is getting a camera these days because technology is coming
Unfortunately,
on so much.
I think it's becoming more and more common, and that's the reason I put the emphasis on it. Is I think you've unfortunately got a lot of people who, if they have a big disposable income, or they're already kind of photographers, and they just go, "I'm going to do this underwater now," and they just dive in with all the equipment. And I get so upset when I see people holding onto the reef or standing on the reef to get the good shot.
Hmm.
And you know that they're not a competent diver. And if they had spent the time building up their hours underwater, then they would be able to get those shots with respect for the environment and not damage it. And I think that kind of ensuring you have that perfect neutral buoyancy and that you have that understanding of your surroundings is so important. So it doesn't matter how big your
Yeah.
camera is, don't stand on the reef.
Yeah, exactly. I did once see a guy kneel and break a table coral. He had a massive like lighthousing, like big rig, and he literally just knelt on it. And I yelled underwater. I said, "Are you effing kidding me?" And my buddy was right with me and was like, and the guy just looked at me, and then we surfaced, and I was like, did you see what you did to that coral? And he didn't even realize. So I think a lot of the time, like the blink of vision, and the problem is that when you've got a camera, you're like just fully absorbed into the camera. And if you're not naturally, like if you haven't dived enough that it's not just natural that you're minding your buoyancy and not on the floor, then your focus, you can't focus on the diving and the photography at the same time. So yeah, having good diving skills, so important. And that's for conservation work as well. Like I've seen people try and like, help out with conservation work and they're just not good divers. And you're damaging the reef more than you're actually helping it. So being able to, be a competent buoyancy is just so important. Like go into the pool, do some buoyancy exercises if you're nervous about it before you go for the dive, because don't mess up the reef, please. Okay, do you have any documentaries that you would recommend for people to watch?
A documentary I saw recently that I really loved, mainly because it was just ridiculously sharky, was 700 Sharks, which is exactly
Right.
what it says on the tin. It's a ridiculous amount of sharks all in one frame. And I have dreams about that dive and I desperately want to do it. So if you love sharks and you want to see one of the most insane locations in the world with some really cool biology thrown in as well, then I check out 700 Sharks. Another film that I loved recently was The Serengeti Rules. Have you seen that?
Okay. No, I haven't seen that.
And it's a beautiful film, but it was a lot more kind of about the biology and understanding ecology and how species. And it's just this really gorgeous documentary that tells the lives of a group of different scientists all around the world and how kind of their research in one area and in one ecosystem can actually transcend into another ecosystem in another area, and kind of just this understanding of the way that the planet rebalances itself. And that's a really fantastic documentary if you're a bit of a science nerd.
So where were both of those documentaries, 700 Sharks, and was it Serengeti Rules?
The Serengeti Rules, yeah.
Where were they? Well, obviously Serengeti was probably filmed in Serengeti, but where was the 700 Sharks one?
So 700 Sharks is Fakarava, French Polynesia. And
Nice.
it's this amazing location where it's like an inverted pyramid. So there's way more predators than there are anything else. And it's just like you look at this ecosystem and you're just like, there's no way it could possibly support this number of sharks. But it turns out that there's actually these spawning events once a month. And when the spawning events take place, everything goes back into equilibrium and all of these sharks can be supported. So it's literally just about walls and walls of sharks living in a canyon waiting for the fish spawning to happen, which is just crazy.
Oh, that sounds serious bucket list.
Right? So yeah, high on the bucket list. And then Serengeti Rules is actually opens in California, looking at the relationship of starfish and the Rocky Intertidal.
Oh, cool.
And then it goes to the Serengeti, looking at wildebeest and the Serengeti and all different places around the world. And it's basically just about that balance in an ecosystem and how trophic cascades work.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I'll definitely check those out. Someone's just said, how can the average citizen in the West contribute to ocean conservation?
I think it really depends on how you want to contribute. So if it's just a matter of you want to be able to support marine science, then absolutely have a look and donate. There are some fantastic organizations out there that are doing brilliant work. And it's through those donations that a lot of marine conservation groups can run. So if you are in a position where you can donate, absolutely donate. If you're looking for ways to get more personally involved, then again, check out your local organizations. Sometimes there are citizen science projects going on or local beach cleans and all sorts of ways where you can become a much more active role in your local community. And that can be becoming reef check qualified so that when you're out on a dive, you can monitor your local reefs, or dive against debris certified so that when you're out on a dive, you can contribute to removing some of that pollution. So my first protocol would always be check out some local organizations and see what their prompts are. But there's often some fantastic ways to get involved.
Yeah, it also depends on what the person's skill set is, right? Like if you're
Absolutely.
a digital marketing strategist, then most organizations will absolutely beg you to help them
Very
um,
true.
with like their platforms and social media. If you're a fundraising specialist, if you're like any kind of like, we have a software designer that's working with us to develop an app that helps people log data on their phones. There's so many different things that you can get involved with depending on what your actual training is in and what your kind of specialty or interest or passion or anything like that is in. So yeah, it depends what you've got to think about what you can bring to the table that's going to be practical, because passion is really useful. But if you've got an existing skill set that can be utilized as well, then that's going to be really beneficial to the organization. Okay, and then have you got any tips for any early career scientists who want to get into photography?
I think that if you're a scientist, you're already in such a unique position where you have that perspective into a world that most people don't have access to. So I would absolutely pick up some basic photography skills, but just remember that the things that you're exposed to will most likely be outstanding to anybody because it's such a different world and you have such a different perspective of it. So don't be afraid to just start taking pictures and start sharing things from your perspective and show what your life is in that world. In terms of actually gaining more skills to become a better photographer or break more into professional photography, there's some really great courses. Depending on what age you are, there's like, I used to run underwater photography classes through Paddy, but I would check out if there are some local organizations where, or local dive schools where they have a photographer, or if there is a photographer that you admire, see if they are running any courses or any classes. But I also do some digital underwater photography classes for teenagers, which are free for girls who click. So if you're really early career and you're just planning on being a marine scientist and you want to use photography, then check out Girls Who Click and some of the free workshops that they're running, and that will give you some tips and pointers. But before you start using your camera underwater, just get used to it on land. I think knowing your equipment is so important. Understanding lighting will make a massive difference. I think that's the greatest challenge we have underwater is lighting. So if you can get a real good feel for that on land, then you'll find that your pictures will become 10 times better underwater.
Mm. Good advice. I actually just realized I missed one out here. Someone has asked, do you think it's possible to get into ocean filmmaking without a marine biology background?
Absolutely. I know so many people who've gone into this industry without a background in marine biology, And I think a lot of the time, some of the best naturists that I know who really understand these ecosystems, understand this environment, they don't have a formal training, and it's just to do with the amount of hours underwater and knowing their area and knowing their coastline, and they can become some of the best resources we have in wildlife filmmaking. I've got a few friends who had backgrounds in completely different subject areas. So one of them had a background in business, one of them had a background in I think two of them are in business, one of them had one in human geography. But I think whatever your background is, you'll come into it with such a different perspective. And I think it's just understanding what your viewpoint is and what you can bring to the table. But it's definitely doable.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. There's been a couple of questions in a question box, which I didn't know Instagram Live could do. Um, okay, what have been your favorite type of animals to work with?
I've never seen that before. My favorite type of animals to work with are great whites. That's just so cool. Yeah, I've had the incredible opportunity to photograph great whites on a few occasions, and every time I see them, I think my heart stops a little bit, and they kind of just they have this dominance in the water that outshines
Mm.
any other species, and I think that their presence is just it's very humbling, and I just have so much appreciation for them. The way they move, the beauty of them, and trying to capture those kind of lesser viewed interactions is always an amazing privilege. So love working with them. Definitely
Whereabouts, whereabouts were you with them?
So I did some work with them off South Africa when I was working on a film called Great White Shark 3D, which was a big IMAX production about sharks and our relationship with sharks.
Oh, cool.
And that was working off Shark Alley, where we were filming them breaching and hunting seals, and it was insane. And then I did some work with them in Guadeloupe, which was like crystal clear gin water, amazing, super aggregations of them. So you can end up with like 2 or 3 in one frame, which is just nuts. And then I
Wow.
also did some work tagging juveniles off Los Angeles, which was literally at the end of Santa
Wow.
Monica Pier, just with baby great whites swimming around. And yeah.
Oh, that is so cool. Oh, okay, right. How does the business revenue aspect of your work look?
Business revenue. So this really depends on what I'm working on at the time. I work full time at the moment as a researcher on big scale blue chip productions. So that is very much so your standard 9 to 5, where that basically covers my rent, my accommodation, my living expenses. So that kind of makes up the bulk of my income. But I'm not good at only doing one thing. So outside of that, I also do photography, and I do bits of writing of articles, and I have my own little independent projects. And a lot of what I do is passion work. And
Yeah.
occasionally there'll be a big payoff. So it might be that I'll go and do an entire shoot purely out of the passion of me wanting to do it, create a load of content surrounding it. And then sometimes it will take me a year or two to get the money back from that, because it will be small pieces over time. Other times it might be that I get offered a job that's actually will cover the full cost of the shoot, and I'll be paid on top of it, which obviously is always the ideal. But
Yeah.
I think when it's a passion project, often you kind of find other ways around it to make it happen. But
Yeah.
I think if you put enough work in, you will get the return. It just takes some time.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay. People who want to submit questions, you can continue to do so. We'll see if we have time to fit them in towards the end. If it's all right with you, we'll jump into our quick fire questions.
Yeah.
So for people that haven't seen this before, basically we ask each of our Q&A guests a series of just short questions that aren't necessarily marine related that helps us get to know you better. So first question, favorite ocean creature?
Great white shark.
Very quick answer. Favorite day of the week?
Saturday.
Nice. Plastic free or eco product that you can't live without?
Probably my bamboo toothbrush, because otherwise my teeth would be really gross.
Favorite beach in the world?
La Jolla Cove in San Diego.
Nice. Last song you listened to?
Oh, the last song I listened to was actually by my cousin, Grace Cresswell, who's a singer. She's working on some stuff, and it was really cool. So that was
Oh, that's
nice.
awesome.
But it's not out yet, so I can't tell you the name.
Oh, okay. Dolphins or sharks?
Sharks.
Glad to hear it. Favorite holiday?
Favorite holiday? Probably Guadeloupe. It wasn't really a holiday; it was more a shoot, but I'm still going to classify it.
Would you rather be able to speak every language in the world or be able to speak to animals?
Speak to animals.
As a superpower, teleportation or breathing underwater?
Teleportation. Yeah.
Okay.
Then I could go everywhere and just hold my breath for a bit.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
Um, what book would you take with you onto a desert island?
I think it would have to be Into the Planet, mainly because I'm halfway through and I really need to know if she makes it back out. Otherwise, I think I'd go crazy. So, yeah, Into the Planet. It's a brilliant book about cave diving, and
Oh, cool.
I really need to know if she survives. So, yeah,
Nice. First thing you're going to do when things get back to normal?
probably hug my friends. Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, why do you love the oceans?
I don't really know how you couldn't. I just so many countless adventures and just yeah, I'm just mesmerized every time I go underwater. So
Yeah, good answer. Okay, cool. Someone has asked, well, we've actually already covered off tips and stuff. So if anyone missed anything that has been discussed on this chat, there was some great career advice and things like that. Then this is going to go onto our YouTube afterwards, and it will be on our IGTV on Instagram. So if you want to watch this back, you can. And I'm just checking through questions now. I think we actually got through most of them. Yeah, I think we've managed to get through lots of people joining. Okay, cool. Awesome. Okay, so before we wrap up, do you have any upcoming projects that you want to tell the audience about, or anything that you want to plug away?
well, my 25 Days in Between Us is going to be playing at a few film festivals over the next couple of months.
Awesome.
So you can check that out at Wild Screen and at the Wildlife Conservation Film Festival, which will be out in the US. And yeah, so keep an eye out for those. There's always kind of an events tab on my website where it will tell you the latest updates for film screenings, but I'm really excited for it to be playing at Wild Screen, so that will be really cool. And then
Cool.
kind of surrounding that, I've been working on a little mini interview series that accompanies the film, which as soon as I get music sorted out for, which is taking much longer than expected, will be going out for social media.
Nice. Okay, cool. And for everyone that has tuned in, you can also follow Inka and Love the Oceans on the top left, I think it might be, or right hand side of the screen. You can click and you'll be able to follow both accounts. As I said, this will be on our YouTube afterwards, so you can check that out then. And also feel free to send through any questions that we didn't get through, and we can both try our best to get them back to you. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you. So yeah, thanks for sparing the time, and all the best with all of the projects.
Awesome. Well, thank you. It's been lovely, and fingers crossed you can get back to normal and back out in the ocean soon.
Fingers crossed. Okay, awesome. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Ciao.